Hello and welcome to episode 441 of the Money to the Masses podcast with your resident expert, Damien Fahey, and me, Andy Leeds.
And the reason Andy's laughing is because after 400 odd shows, he couldn't remember his intro that he said every single episode. So it's good to be back on the podcast this week. We're actually both quite excited, aren't we, Andy? Because we're about to head out for the Money to the Masses Christmas do. So we're recording this podcast, and in about 40 minutes, we're going to head into central London with the rest of the team and enjoy a bit of indoor golf and then going out for drinks and food. So it's going to be hopefully a really good afternoon. And last year, do you remember we actually invited podcast listeners to join us in the evening? We're not doing that this year. We didn't have time to arrange it, but we can fill you in next week on how that went. But one prediction I'm going to make is that Andy wins the golf. Andy's a very competitive and very good game player. All things bowls and anything like that we've done indoors. Andy is normally the champion.
I don't like that kind of pressure, but I'll be honest, I'll be absolutely gutted if I don't win. I don't know if you remember a couple of years back, we did the Crystal Maze, and there was a particular skill game with a ball and a paddle that you had to get it into a hole. And I've been dining out on that for years because I actually won 2 crystals on one game, which the lady said hadn't been done before. Anyway,
I was impressed, and it was impressive at the time. But Andy's hand-eye coordination is obviously exceptional, having played bowls at a very high level.
And I tell you what, talking about hand-eye coordination, I'll put it out there then, when we do get round to doing a podcast meetup, a live podcast event, a road show, these things are planned sometimes in the future. We were going to do it a couple of years ago and then sort of lockdown scuppered us, but I'm sure that will come back at some point. If that ever happens, just ask me to balance something on my chin or my nose and I'll happily do it for you. It's kind of like my party trick.
It was from your Haven days, wasn't it, Andy, when you were a blue coat? But the other day I realised next year is the 10th anniversary of the podcast. So I have to look it up. I think it was sometime in June. Technically, we've been doing this podcast for almost a decade, which caught me by surprise. If you'd asked me off the cuff, I probably would have said we've been doing it for about 7-8 years, but we've been doing it now nearly for a decade. So that is quite incredible. So maybe we should mark the occasion.
Okay, so let's move on with this week's podcast then. What are we going to be talking about in this week's show?
Right, so the first piece, we're going to do something unusual. I'm going to let Andy go first. Andy's going to be doing a piece on streaming, so TV streaming. We were sent in a request by a listener asking about the cheapest and best ways to stream TV. I'm going to then do a piece about the Santa Rally, so nice festive link there. I've done a piece before on the podcast many years ago now. I'm revisiting that because there seems to have been a slight change in the Santa Rally phenomenon. And the final piece on the podcast, I want to talk about flexible ISAs, and there's going to be a rule that I'm not sure many people are aware of regarding flexible ISAs. Most people won't even know what a flexible ISA probably is, but in this environment of high interest rates, there's a nice trick that you can use to boost the interest that you can gain on your money.
Okay, so let's move on with the first piece of the podcast then, and I'm going to start us off this week, and I'm going to be talking about TV streaming. Now, Phil got in touch to say, everyone keeps telling me that I'm being ripped off by Netflix and there are better options out there. The choice seems to be overwhelming, from Amazon sticks to TV feeds. How about you do a detailed look at the TV sector and what's available? Now, this is pretty timely actually, because we're coming up to the Christmas period and we're seeing lots of adverts about different streaming services, and it does beg the question, how do I get the most out of my TV where I can actually see the things I want to see but without having to pay for every single one every single month? So I've done a bit of a rundown on the different streaming services and what kind of offers and deals are available and how you can maybe maximize your watching without overspending. So the first one I'm going to be looking at is Disney Plus. I've got a couple of children. We use Disney Plus at home. Now, Disney Plus costs £7.99 per month for the standard plan, or you can upgrade to £10.99 for the premium plan. However, they have introduced a reduced plan at just $4.99 a month. And by doing that, you will have to endure adverts. So depends how much you value sort of reducing your cost to watching adverts. I know, for example, I won't be doing that because my children will then be served toys and everything else on the adverts, and it will end up costing me more in the long run. I just know it.
And one thing just to point out there, they've got the different plans at that premium level. This was one that was brought in, and one of the big differences is really they've got 4K, so you can have a better definition of TV. Now, I'm not the sort of person who is really that bothered about the quality of the image being 4K. I wouldn't really notice, neither would my children. And I know there are things to do with number of devices that can be used at once on the streaming service as well with that plan. But I think people have to look at what they're getting, what they're paying for, and whether they're using it enough. So for me, I didn't feel the top plan was actually worth its while.
Interesting you say that, because I have a Sky package and they gave me free access to ultra high definition. Now, it would normally cost an extra £3.99 a month. I think it is an extra £4 a month. And so I've had access for 3 months, and I'll be honest with you, I've noticed no difference at all. So in terms of it working for them as like an advert for them to look what you could be getting, for me, it's just not worth it. So I definitely won't be renewing that.
And that's Sky. And believe me, Andy would notice on his TV. It's not like Andy's not into watching TV or anything like that. You would be able to tell. So, I mean, again, some people on here will say that they do notice the difference and they're real film buffs or whatever. But I think for most people, they probably wouldn't really notice.
And so just finishing up on Disney Plus then, obviously you can make a slight saving if you prefer to play annually. It's around about 10% saving. And you can find some deals out there that will allow you to have Disney Plus for the first 3 months for $1.99. There's less this side of Christmas because they obviously know people want to have access to Christmas movies. So in the new year, look out for deals where you can get it for the first 3 months at a reduced cost. And of course, you can still, because it's a monthly plan, cancel after those first 3 months if you decide you don't want to take it on any further. And another way you can save potentially some money on Disney Plus is to look out for deals on cashback sites. So from time to time, there will be deals on cashback sites like Quidco and Top Cashback.
And the other thing I just point out, we do a deals page on the Made to Message website. We'll put a link to it in the notes of this podcast. So every day we put up a deal that we pick. We pick deals that are good. The internet seems to be flooded with deals that don't really seem to be deals almost, or ones that I'm never going to use. So we tend to try and pick things that are deals that people would actually like. So we're very selective. And on there, I have seen deals regards to Disney Plus anyway. So do keep an eye on that page. And we do post them on Instagram every day. So follow us on Instagram and you'll see our deal of the day. And you may see some of these streaming services appear on there.
Looking at Now TV and particularly Now Cinema or Sky Cinema. So deals can be tricky to find, but if you've had Now Cinema before, then keep an eye out on your inbox because they regularly send offers to entice you back. I personally have previously had what used to be called Sky Movies. It's now sort of Now Cinema or Sky Cinema. And I just the other week had an offer where I could have access to all the movies on Sky through Now Cinema for just £1 a month. Now, I already have Sky Movies, so I actually sent that via email to Joel, and Joel was able to sign up, and he was very, very happy with that deal.
Yeah, so the point is that Andy's making is that some of the deals that you get sent via marketing that other people can benefit. So if you have somebody who does have one of these services, then sometimes they may send out deals that you could potentially use. So make sure you're very nice to your friends and family that may have some of these streaming services. And just to remind people who don't know, Now TV is effectively Sky's online digital platform. So rather than having the Sky beamed into your home, you can actually get it via the internet. And so you can use smart TVs to watch it, for example, or watch it online.
And the great thing about the deals where you get it at a reduced price for the first however many months is once you've enjoyed it for those amount of months, you can cancel it with absolutely no quibbles. So for example, Joel's going to get access to all the movies for just £1 a month. And if he so wishes, he can then cancel after those 3 months and only have paid £3 for 3 months.
Yeah, so he can enjoy the Christmas movies. And I also personally got a deal via Now TV to be able to watch Sky Cinema over the Christmas period. So do keep an eye out because they're constantly bombarding you, trying to get you to sign up to other packages. So just be mindful when you do get the emails, you know what you're signing up for, how long you're signing up for, and your ability to cancel when you can, because they do send out these deals. And it seems to me, anyway, it just seems to be the way I see it, the less you engage with it, the more you seem to get the deal anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. If you do already have a Sky package, then Sky Cinema can be added to your existing Sky plan. There's a deal at the moment offering for just £8 a month. I think it's usually £10 a month. Although with that deal, you do have to sign up for 18 months. Now, me personally, I did sign up for it because I'm a Sky Glass customer. And by signing up for that £8 a month, they actually gave me an extra £3 off my Sky package. So effectively, I got it for £5 a month. But here's the kicker. Sky Cinema at the moment allows you to have 2 cinema tickets every month for free. They give you 2 cinema codes for View Cinemas, which are worth up to sort of £12 per ticket. So if you're a cinema goer and you regularly like going to the cinema, that could be a way that you could end up getting movies at home and cinema tickets for just £8 a month. And in addition to that, they are offering Paramount Plus for free with that plan, and that's usually $6.99 a month. So you could combine all those together for just a few pounds a month. Moving on to Netflix, obviously Netflix is pretty popular. It is difficult to find actual deals with Netflix because obviously it's a very popular platform. But again, Sky allows you to add the Netflix basic account. Now that's the one with adverts, completely free to your Sky package. So again, if you're already paying for Sky, then that's a free benefit for you. Don't obviously just take out Sky to get that benefit. That doesn't make any sense. If you have Sky and you prefer to remain ad-free, then you can still save money by adding Netflix to your Sky account. You just log in as normal and you click a few buttons and subscribe. Sky do all the work for you. They actually talk to Netflix and get your plan moved over to Sky and apply the discount on there for you. So there's very little for you to have to do, and you immediately make a saving for that. For example, I do that, and instead of paying $10.99 for my Netflix, I actually just pay £4, and it's the same service.
Yeah, it's a good tip. You're basically saying if you're already using some of these services and you're feeling like you're overpaying, there is a possibility of combining some of them together.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, on Netflix, another option is to get added as an additional member to someone else's subscription if they're willing to let you do that. Now, this is all official. Netflix allow you to do it. That additional person will get their own login and password, and the additional cost is $4.99 a month instead of the $10.99 a month. So it's a decent saving. But do remember that the bill payer will be paying that additional $4.99. So if you have a family member that's willing to do that, you're going to have to work out who pays.
Yeah, and I know there are a lot of people who, for example, might have had as a family a Netflix account and would have shared with somebody, say that it was a relative, maybe their parents or an elderly relative who was not going to have their own Netflix account on their own, and they've said, gave them a login and said, here you go, you can watch Netflix whenever you want, because you're able to share and it wasn't IP specific. But since they've clamped down on it, this is a method to do it legitimately, isn't it? They're basically monetizing that approach that people were using.
Exactly that, and that's an ad-free version. So it is the standard Netflix, which is effectively the $10.99 plan, but it is a restriction on the amount of devices, so you can only log in on one device.
Yeah, so it's a solution for people who may now not be able to do that, and they're now finding that they can no longer share because there is a clampdown. Rather than having to set up a new $10.99 account for that person in their family, they could just add $4.99 to theirs. Yeah, it's a saving, but unfortunately for those people, they are going to be paying more.
Yep, you got it. So Amazon Prime Video next. Make sure you take advantage of any free trials. Amazon are obviously very good at marketing. Customers can often take advantage of 30-day free trials, for example, if they haven't had it before. And again, from time to time, there are deals where you can access Amazon Prime Video for just 99 pence for a week. And that's perfect if you want to binge watch like a series or something and you don't want to pay a regular price every month. Obviously, if you use Amazon Prime anyway for your deliveries and everything else and your photo storage, then of course you've got access to all the videos just as part of that ongoing cost. If you don't want to pay the full cost of the Amazon Prime, which is $8.99 a month, you can get access to just Prime Video for a reduced cost of $5.99 a month. The last two I'm going to cover off then is Apple TV Plus and Paramount Plus. Let's start with Apple TV. It seems to be one of those streaming services where there's always a deal to be had. They'll often have deals offering free viewing for up to 3 months. But the kicker here is that even if you've taken advantage of that before, often if you're patient, you'll get that offer again. And so if you're willing to wait for those offers to arrive in your inbox, then just be patient and it's likely that you'll be able to continue watching that for free. Obviously, if you like Apple TV Plus, I'm not saying don't pay for it. I'm just saying that if you're patient, there are offers out there.
As somebody who's used Apple TV Plus, I don't think it would necessarily be for everybody because of the depth of content, but there are shows on there that some people will want to watch and you can only watch them via Apple TV Plus. But like Andy said, you often get a free 3-month subscription trial, and then make sure if you use that, you do put a date in the diary. If you're not willing to carry on paying for it and then cancel it, you will likely get another one. And especially if you buy Apple products, it's coming to Christmas. Lots of people buy Apple products. You will be getting lots of offers with that because when you buy an Apple product, you typically get the Apple TV free trial again, so you can keep using them. So that is something to also bear in mind. And the last one you're going to talk about, Andy, is
Paramount Plus is the last one on there. So it's one of those that's nice to have. There's a few bits and pieces that are worth watching. It's currently offering a 7-day free trial for new customers, so make sure you take advantage of that. Additionally, I mentioned earlier, if you take out a Sky Cinema plan and you've already got a Sky package, you'll get this added on for free anyway, and it's worth $6.99 a month, so make sure you do that if you're interested.
That's a great piece, Andy. And we've deliberately not talked about password sharing, account sharing, and also not talked about things like Fire Sticks that give you access illegally to content. So there'll be people listening to this who will probably be sitting there going, you could do a lot cheaper if you do this sort of thing. We're not going to obviously go down that route or condone that. So these are the ways in which you can get it cheapest legitimately.
Yeah, and if you are taking advantage of any of these free trials on any of these services, as Damien said earlier, put a note in the diary, because often what you'll have to do is provide payment details. So that is a commitment to be paying in the future. If you think you're only going to be doing it for 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, put a date in the diary, make sure you cancel it.
Yeah, and the positive of most of these, because they're digital content and the way you subscribe is online, they actually are very easy to cancel online as well. So you can go on Apple TV. I can tell you for a fact, you can go in and there is a section in your settings that says subscriptions. You go in there and you see all the things you're subscribing to, including like regular app payments and stuff like that. And you can cancel those if you want to quite easily. So that's people who use Apple iPhones.
Brilliant. So let's move on to the next piece then. I'm going to be talking about the Santa Rally. We haven't spoken about it on the podcast for a couple of years now, but we're bringing it back.
Yeah, so if you go back to episode 300 and episode 157, we talked about the Santa Rally. And in short, the Santa Rally is a phenomenon that exists within stock markets, whereby markets tend to rally during the last 5 trading days of the year and the first 2 trading days of the new year. So basically the Christmas week into the new year, you see markets typically rally. Now, there are lots of theories as to why that might be. There may be a bit of profit taking, people closing out positions, a bit of festive euphoria, a lack of trading volume, so fewer people are trading. So when people do make trades, it has an outsized impact on the market. And I've looked at the data and gone back and over the years and analysed, is there such a thing? And in fact, I've extended it beyond just those few days because it isn't really meaningful. I don't think as an investor, if you're buying things like funds and you're investing for the long term, it's such a short time frame. I've looked at more of a, what about the month of December? And the month of December is typically a positive month for equity markets. And so I looked at the research over the years, and when I first did it back in 2017, I looked at the performance going back to 1994 up until that point on the US stock markets. That's the S&P 500, the NASDAQ 100 and the FTSE 100 to see, did markets disproportionately rally during the December period? And the findings at the time were that it did. And the odds of December being positive for the S&P 500 was around 73%. So that's almost a 3 in 4 chance. Well, if you think about it, the odds of a positive month at any month is basically 1 in 2. It's either positive or it's not. So over that period since 1994, you could see for American stock markets, there was a 73% chance that you were going to have a positive month. And so the Santa Rally, if I'm taking it in terms of this podcast, meaning the whole of December, it is a phenomenon. It does seemingly exist. There's historical evidence to show it does. But interestingly, although it seems to have links with the US, you often see it written about in US investment headlines rather than so much in the UK. It's more prevalent in the UK. The odds were about 85% that you'd have a positive December if you look at the data for the FTSE 100 going back as far as 1994. But when we talk about positive, what is the likely positive nature? So if you go back over that long period of time, for the S&P 500, the average return was about 0.97%, so almost 1% during the month of December. The FTSE 100, on the other hand, the average December return was 1.84% over that period, which is significant. So the Santa Rally does exist. But when I looked at this 3 years ago, I saw some sort of trend that was seemingly starting to emerge. And I questioned whether the Santa Rally was actually losing its power. Was it starting to wane? And now updating the data to take into account what's happened in the last few years, we've had some quite incredible market conditions. And the last time I looked at this was at 2020. So if you remember, if you go back to 2020, we just had the US election and we just discovered the COVID-19 vaccine. So it's a very positive period in markets. And we were entering December then, and actually there was a Santa Rally in terms of the December positive return. But since then, we obviously had a pretty dire 2022. So this latest analysis I've done is part of a update for 80/20 investor members where I've looked at this Santa Rally and whether it might happen again in 2023. Now, you can look at the article if you want to take out a free trial. If you're an 80/20 investor member, you can just go and have a look at it anyway. Now, the data suggests that the power of the Santa Rally is in fact waning. So I looked at the last 5 years and the last 10 years. So far on the podcast, I've been talking about all the way back to 1994, but I did look at the data in chunks of the last 20, the last 10 and the last 5. And interestingly, we've got to the stage now when we take into account the data over the last few years that the average return over 10 years on the S&P 500 during December is minus 0.8%. So basically it's negative. If you look at the last 5 years, the average return in December on the S&P 500 is almost minus 0.8%. Now you've got to compare that to figures that were overwhelmingly positive the last time I carried this research out. And actually the last 10 years, the odds of a Santa rally had dropped to 75% from 80%. So we had quite a sweet spot for a period of time for the Santa rally during the sort of early 2010s. But now we're at a period where seemingly the odds of a Santa rally over the last 5 years is only 60%. So it's getting to the point, it's almost heading towards 50-50. But even so, the average return over those 5 years for any given December is still negative. Now, again, the FTSE 100 is the place to be if you are trying to use the Santa rally to make a bit of money. Now, over the last 10 years, it is still in positive territory, still over 1%, the average return in the FTSE 100 for December. The odds of it occurring have dropped. It's now 60%. It was 70% before. Now, the last 5 years, still there's a positive typical December return of 0.37%. Yes, that has dropped by more than 1 percentage point since the last time I carried out this research, but the odds frequency is still around 60%. It had previously dropped anyway. So last time I said that it seems that the Santa rally is losing its power. The evidence does suggest that that is a continued trend rather than just an anomaly from back in 2020. But one bright spot, if we do just focus on the last 5 years, then if we do get a Santa rally, well, the evidence from the last 5 years is that that has typically resulted in a 3.68% return for the S&P 500 during December. It doesn't mean it's going to happen again, but conversely, if we don't get one, then the average has been a fall of 7.5%. So it does seem to be, if we have a Santa rally in recent years, it's going to be good news. If we're not, it's very bad news. So if you want to see more about that piece of research, you can, of course, take out a free trial of 80/20 Investor.
Okay, and the final piece of the podcast, Damien, you're going to be talking about flexible ISAs.
So I wanted to talk about flexible ISAs. So you may or may not have heard of what a flexible ISA is, given that there isn't much advertising out there or promotion about this particular feature of some ISA products. Now, a flexible ISA is essentially a feature of certain ISAs out there whereby if you put money into an ISA, you can withdraw it in the same tax year and then top it back up again without it impacting your ISA allowance. And to explain what I mean by that, normally what would happen, let's say you have a cash ISA, it isn't a flexible cash ISA. If you put in £20,000 into your cash ISA, you withdraw £10,000 from that in the same tax year, so balance has dropped down to £10,000. You can't top it back up later. Say you had to access your money in an emergency because you've used your annual allowance of £20,000. It doesn't matter that you've withdrawn some, it's not netted off. So you have used your ISA allowance. So if you had that £10,000 again and you decided you wanted to put it into savings, you'd have to put it into something else like a savings account. You couldn't use a cash ISA for that money because you've already used your cash ISA allowance with that initial £20,000 contribution. Now, flexible ISA rules were introduced in April 2016 and few providers support them when it comes to stocks and shares. There are a number of banks and building societies that do provide flexible ISAs. So what is the advantage of a flexible ISA? Well, it's essentially an ISA in the same way that you'd have maybe a cash ISA or a stocks and shares ISA. But when it comes to that annual allowance, if in the example I gave, you already put £20,000 into your cash ISA this tax year, you suddenly needed £10,000 out because some emergency, you withdraw that £10,000. Then if you had that money again within that tax year, that same one, you could put it back into that cash ISA and it would count towards your ISA allowance for that year. So what would happen, your £20,000, when you took out the 10, it would actually go, oh right, actually you've only used £10,000 of your ISA allowance because you've withdrawn the money in the same tax year as when you contributed it. So when you top it back up, it says, yes, you've got £10,000 ISA allowance left and you can put it back in and then you've used your full £20,000 ISA allowance. So what the rules do is allow you to take money in and out of ISAs if you need to for some reason. It gives you that greater flexibility because obviously for people who maybe put money into ISAs, they don't want to tap into them because again, it means they've taken money out of this beneficial tax-free environment and they can't put it back in that tax year. They'd have to wait to the next tax year. So that is interesting. But what people might not realise is if, for example, let's say you had £50,000 that had been put into cash ISAs over a period of time. So you've built up that pots. It's worth £50,000. Theoretically, you can actually take the money out of your ISA and maybe put it into a savings account if you wanted to, but then put that money back into an ISA and it still remain within their tax wrap. And the way you have to do that, you'd have to say, for example, at the start of a new tax year, so tax year starts at the 6th of April, you decided to withdraw your cash ISA holdings. So you took money out, and let's say it's £50,000, and you might decide to put it into several high interest accounts out there because they might be offering better savings rates. But then if before the 5th of April the following year, you put all that money back, that full £50,000 back into the ISA, this is assuming you have a flexible ISA, then you will have that money back in that environment. You'll have got a better rate of interest possibly, and you've got that obviously protection from taxation, and you can repeat that process again and again throughout the years. And it's a benefit of a flexible ISA, which I don't think many people know. Now, why would you do that? I mean, one of the reasons is because if you look out there, often the best savings rates are on savings accounts rather than cash ISAs. I'm just talking about cash ISAs at this point in time. We'll put a link in the show notes to our savings tables so people can have a look at them. But if you look around, even with the same bank, you can get a better rate sometimes outside of an ISA than you can within it. But it's a benefit that most people haven't really worried about. So the flexible benefit of a flexible ISA. But in an environment like now where you get some very good savings rates out there, then it has become something that people might want to look at and bear in mind. Now, the benefits of a flexible ISA really come to the fore if you've got a lot of money in savings. So let's say you are close to, or you use the full £20,000 allowance every year, and you might want to dip in and out of that money temporarily, for example. So you might want to withdraw money and then top it back up later within that same tax year. Then they have a benefit. Now, people listening to this might think, but it sounds like, is this a different type of ISA? No, it's a cash ISA or a stocks and shares ISA. It's still the same ISAs that exist now, but just some of them have this flexible feature, and so they're called flexible ISAs. Now, the issue is it's quite difficult to work out who offers flexible ISAs. So there are flexible stocks and shares ISAs. There are very few of them, in fact. One of the companies that do have flexible ISAs is Bestinvest. Of course, you're less likely to be moving your money in and out of the market at short notice, but it is an option for people who might want that flexibility if they want to access their money in an emergency. But in terms of cash ISAs, where I think it is particularly interesting, you need to go and look at the T's and C's of the account that you're interested in to see if that is a flexible ISA. So I'm not going to run through a list of all the providers that do offer flexible ISAs, because some of them do offer flexible ISAs, but only on certain products. A good example of that is Metro Bank. They offer a flexible ISA on their instant access cash ISA only, but they don't therefore do it on anything to do with fixed rates. Now, interestingly, if you look at the Best Buy tables, you can get about 5.5% on a 1-year fixed term cash ISA with Metro Bank, but if you had a 1-year savings bond, so savings outside of an ISA, you can get 5.8%. So there is a differential. Now, of course, if you're putting money in and out in the same tax year, then you wouldn't be able to use a 1-year fixed product anyway. So that's one of the reasons why they don't offer it. But the point is, do look at the T's and C's of the individual product with a company. Now, I'll just give you some of the companies that don't offer flexible cash ISAs. That's people like Charter Savings Bank, Co-op Bank, First Direct, HSBC, Leeds Building Society, NS&I, Post Office, NatWest, Sainsbury's Bank, Santander, and Shawbrook Bank. So that's not a complete list, but they are some of the big names out there. So do be aware. Flexible ISAs are useful because, of course, some people may want to move money in and out temporarily because, as I've mentioned, emergencies. But some people in this environment might be intrigued because they may be able to use it to be able to boost the return that they can get on their savings, particularly if they have the money in a easy access cash ISA, because don't forget, everyone has a personal savings allowance too. So that is just something, an FYI, have a look for it. It might be something that's of interest to people and something they might not realise about flexible ISAs. It's not something that's shouted about by the providers. So there you go, Andy, a quick piece on flexible ISAs, but mainly the benefits of how you can optimise the amount of interest that you get on your savings while keeping the benefits of an ISA.
And so that's it. We're done for this week. If you want to get in touch with Damien, you can do so in the usual way. It's damien@moneytothemasses.com. If you can, please review the podcast. We'd really appreciate that. There's always a mug on offer for people who give us 5-star reviews. And if it gets read out on the podcast, again, you can email us in and we'll be happy to send you out a Money to the Masses mug.
As ever, don't forget to follow us on all our socials. socials, particularly Instagram, which is my personal favourite, but also our Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/money to the masses, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. So Andy, I think all that's left is for us to say until next time.
Until next time.